Hey everyone, grateful to have you tuning in for today's message. And today I'm going to tackle a pretty big concept, something that I've been kind of mulling over in my own life, and in particular, since having an amazing conversation with the one and only Jeff Brown yesterday on the Limitless Potential show. So this is going to be an interesting topic where we dive into all the different reactions that all of us are having in response to the pandemic. All right, so this is going to be one of those sort of topics where you can, if you're courageous enough and honest enough with yourself, you're going to be able to pinpoint exactly where you are situated. And also it's going to give you some understanding about how other people who are responding differently to you during this pandemic, what's going on in their world, and like what could be really where that's coming from. All right, so this is going to be an interesting one. And as always, I love it when you guys play along at home. I want to hear your perspectives. I want to hear your experience. I want to see if you can identify for yourself how you might be responding to this in what I want to talk to you guys about today, or other people in your life. So at the end of the day, I believe that our freedom comes from our self-awareness, and our ability to relate with others comes through our understanding of the differences. So basically, that's what we're going to cover, some different bases with that today. So let's dive into it. And today's message is the connection between your response to the pandemic, and you can look at any sort of challenging circumstance in your life, but let's talk about, what's going on in the world right now. Like we haven't heard it enough, but let's tackle it from what I believe to be a really empowered angle of talking about the pandemic, and that response that you have to it, and the relationship that response has with trauma. All right. So this is going to be an interesting one to dive into. Now, just to straight out the gate, I just want to define trauma in the way that I use it, which is a subjective experience. So it's not like, okay, there's this degree of trauma, like it has to be this horrific sexual abuse or whatever we define as this amazingly traumatic experience, and then we compare ourselves and we're like, no, I ain't got no trauma. Right? That's one of the responses that I'm going to talk to you guys about today, and one in which I found myself in. But I want you to think about trauma as we've all had traumatic experiences happen to us. And this has been a journey that I've been on to even get to the point of acknowledging that, okay, maybe I've had some experiences that in comparison to all these other things that I think are traumatic, they've got nothing. But actually, it's not about the comparison between what I've experienced and what this other person has experienced. It's actually about the subjective experience that all of us have. You living as you have, these experiences that have affected you on a subjective level. And we're not telling you that to put you in a box or stay there or be negative. It's actually the most empowering place of acknowledgement and not denial that you can get to. So just saying that straight out the gate. And I, like you, have noticed that no matter where we are in the world, and we have access to viewing how different cultures and different, there's different world views around how we're responding to the pandemic. But I, like you, have noticed that there's not just one way that we're all responding, right? We've got people who are following suit with what authorities are telling us to do. We've got people who are thinking there's a whole bunch of conspiracy theories. We've got people who are hoarding and going crazy and getting all the toilet paper they can for their lifetime. I don't know where they're fitting it in their house, but that is part of the response. And there are people who just don't ever want to talk about it. Like, let's not ever talk about it. All right. So we've all got these different ways of responding, and it'd be interesting to see if you can pinpoint how you tend to respond. But actually, Jeff Brown, in the interview that I had with him yesterday, he's an amazing author of 7 books now. He's got his 7th book coming out. But basically, we were talking all things about grounded spirituality, right? being able to access higher levels of consciousness, but in a way that doesn't just, transcend our body and our emotions and who we are and our humanness, but actually finding an integration of all of our humanness, right? With, those higher levels of consciousness and perspectives, right? So basically, one of the things that struck me to the core that he mentioned, and if you guys haven't watched it, go check it out. It's on the Limitless Potential Facebook page. You can search at Limitless Potential Show or whatever. If you're on my stuff, it's on my page, so it's all good. But basically, go check it out. And one of the things that he mentioned when he was talking about, how the world is responding to the coronavirus and the pandemic is he said that people are responding to the pandemic actually from a trauma response from their relationship with authority. And what he means by the relationship with authority really generally means, who were those authority figures when you were growing up? Usually it's your parents, right? Or a caregiver or a guardian of some sort. And then basically, if we have unresolved, unhealed traumas in relation to that power dynamic and that relationship with authority, we're still playing that out. No matter how old you are, if you haven't healed that stuff and acknowledged it, you're playing it out in reality now. And when we have a crisis or when there's something super challenging, that's when this really gets magnified. So I'm sure you guys have heard of the different responses that we have to fear. And really what these are, I'm going to just unpack them quickly. I know you would have heard of them, but I want to help you to apply it to everybody's responses to the pandemic right now. So basically, they're really responses to traumatic experiences. They are learned ways of and modes of surviving, right, in challenging times. And generally what would have happened was you had some experiences as a child, you had a certain set of parents, you had a certain set of circumstances, and basically you decided, this is a good strategy when I get into fear, how I'm going to make sure I survive. Right, so we've heard of at least the first three that I'm going to mention, and you might be surprised to learn the fourth if you haven't heard this before. I know I was personally, because it's a newer development in psychology, this understanding. But basically, the first strategy that some people are using, and you can look at it in the context of the pandemic, is their response, their defense mechanism, or their traumatic defense mechanism of, like, I gotta fight this, right? Like, and this is all about power and dominance over other people in order to protect the self. All right, so you might be seeing that there's a certain set of people who that's their way of responding to a crisis like the pandemic, right? There's a lot of fear going on. There's a lot of unresolved traumatic experiences and relationships with authorities from our whole life journey going on. And there is a set of people who tend to more so go towards, I got to get power and I got to get dominance and I've got to make sure that, like, I can get everybody doing what I want them to do in order for me to feel safe and protected. All right, so that's one response to the pandemic, and like I said, to every other challenge. The next response you would have heard of is flight. So in the pandemic terms, this is the people who are trying to outrun the problem, right? They're the people who are getting obsessive compulsive. They are the people who are trying to, like, be so planned ahead, and they're hoarding everything, and they're stockpiling all this stuff, right? Because they want to outrun the problem. Okay, that's the people who are responding with this flight mechanism. Then we've got those of us who respond in a freeze mentality, right? So that's where we get dissociated, and that's where we're numbing out to the problem. Right? Like, I don't want to talk about that stuff. Like, I don't want to know. No, we don't need to talk about that, right? I don't know how I feel about that, right? We just dissociate, we numb out, we disconnect, and we just kind of almost live in this fantasy world. There's some people operating in this freeze response by, just all this, like Jeff Brown was kind of mentioning, like positive thinking. There's definitely a time and place for positive thinking, and there's definitely merit to use it right now. But are you using it in a conscious way, or are you using it as a way to dissociate and avoid how you actually feel and how things are actually affecting you, right? So there's a difference there. And then the last way that you might be seeing people respond to the pandemic right now is in this way of fawn, right? So what fawning is it's this avoiding conflict, right? And trauma by just appeasing others, right? By just conforming. And that looks like it's conforming to either side of the fence, right? You could be conforming with what the local authorities are telling you or the global authorities are telling you, and just like, yes, like I just want to do whatever they think I should do. Or you can be fawning on the other side with the conspiracy theorists or people who are, against wearing masks or whatever it is. It doesn't matter what the belief system is. It's these people just like, I want to just fit in with the crowd. I don't want to create conflict. Like, I want to just appease everybody and avoid conflict and just do whatever they tell me, right? And that can sit on either side of the fence, like I said. So basically you might be able to see yourself in one of those key ways of responding to traumatic experiences. And I'm not saying all of this stuff in order to kind of put us in a box and make us feel terrible about ourselves and how unconscious we may be operating. You know, at the end of the day, this has become like a pattern of your personality. It's not the ultimate reality, right? If you think about it that way. It's a pattern that you've learned as a survival mechanism in order to survive in challenging times. And if you don't do the work to heal your past, right, and heal those relationships with parents, authority figures, whatever you've gone through on a subjective level that's traumatic, right? It doesn't have to be this crazy thing that you've experienced in order for you to have trauma in your life. But basically, if you haven't done some work on that, you're ultimately responding with these defense mechanisms that are going to see you just kind of coming from fear rather than a strong, solid foundation of who you are, right? And what is actually right. Being informed, noticing your patterns, and actually being able to see the truth of the situation. And I wanted to mention this key little thing. I had this conversation with my granny this morning, who just turned 95 today. So I had a bit of a Skype birthday with her this morning, and basically I was talking to her. She's a very intelligent woman who's, lived a lot of life, right? She's a survivor of the Holocaust. She's seen a lot of life, a lot of this world over the nearly last 100 years, right? And we were talking about what's going on in the world, and she's like, pretty upset by what's happening. Here where we live in Melbourne, it's kind of gone a bit crazy and the numbers are skyrocketing, and it's really challenging hearing about, particularly in nursing homes, how that's affecting the elderly and their families and all sorts of stuff going on, right? And basically one of the things that she said was, Vanessa, it's been like being on a merry-go-round. Like the same issues I've faced many, many years ago are just circling back around on this merry-go-round. But she said, but now I feel like I'm this person who I can kind of have a laugh because I've been here before. But previously, like when you're in it, and when most of our generations alive today, we're in it and we're not, seeing it in the same viewpoint. But because she's been on the merry-go-round for a while, she's seeing this different perspective. And one thing really stood out to me with what she said, and she likened it to the time in our history where women were being burnt at the stake because they were being called witches, right? Because what she was saying is people get really black and white in their thinking, right? When they're uncertain about why something's happening and how to deal with it, black and white thinking gives them this false sense of security. And so back then, it was, different circumstances and situations were happening that people couldn't explain. But they wanted to they wanted the black and white. We need to know. We need to have certainty. Even if it's a false sense of certainty, we need to know it. And so these women got blamed and called witches, like they were the creators of the things that weren't explainable at that point in human history and knowledge as to why things were occurring, right? And so she could see that, that is a repetition that's part of the merry-go-round right now. Like, we're having people come out and go, they're terrible people, or this is why it's to blame. And we all want this false sense of certainty that we're trying to just we're in an uncertain time in history where we don't have all the answers. And people want the answers in order to feel safe and secure, right? And so that's why we respond in the ways that we do. So, a good question to ask yourselves right now so that you can have high levels of self-awareness and understanding of others is ask yourself, if our response to a global crisis or any sort of challenge or crisis is one in which we engage in, that fight or that flight or that freeze or that fawn response, and we know that that's connected to trauma, unhealed trauma, right? We're responding in these survivalistic ways rather than consciously informing ourselves and determining what the best course of action is. If we can understand that about human nature and about ourselves, then ask yourself, when you were a kid and you had some sort of challenging experience, maybe you had a narcissistic parent or something, or maybe you had the opposite. Maybe you had a parent who just was trying to be like you, or, there's all sorts of different experiences that we have, right, with those authority figures. Ask yourself, who did you need to be in order to survive? Right? Did you need to be somebody who fought back, right? Did you need to be somebody who put their head in the sand? Did you need to be somebody who denied their own feelings and just maintained harmony? Did you need to be somebody who just did what they were told no matter what, right? And when you can ultimately address this stuff, that's the first step of healing any trauma, is the acknowledgement of it, right? And like I said, and I've said multiple times in this message, trauma is subjective. Stop comparing yourself to other people, because that's a source of denial. Believe me, I've been there most of my life. It's only in the last probably over the last 2 years, but probably last year and even more so 6 months and even more so 1 week, I've gotten to new levels of actually acknowledgement instead of denial. Right, which has been very empowering for me. And even in just that interview with Jeff Brown yesterday, that woke me up to something that I hadn't previously had the language to in terms of our relationship to authority. So I'm in the journey with you guys, right? But we need to understand and acknowledge why we do what we do, what's driving it, what's the underlying motivation. Because just looking at behavior, you can call that right or wrong, or they're doing the right thing, or they're doing the wrong thing, or we get a fine if we do that, so we shouldn't do that, or whatever, right? You can look at the behavior, but what we really want to look at as empowered individuals is our own personal motivation behind everything that we do. Is it coming from fear, right? Is it a fear response? Oh, got to fit in, or I've got to do this, or I've got to go against that, or I've got to isolate, or I've got to hide away, or whatever. Or is it coming from a really solid sense of self, an open-minded self who doesn't need a false sense of certainty in order to operate in a conscious way in the world, right? And, looking at it from whatever angle supports you, but personally, looking at it from my personal experience, from these 4 different ways that we generally just respond to traumatic experiences. And if we're responding as adults in those same ways, it's not to feel bad about ourselves. It's actually, wow, I can acknowledge that. And I can know my pathway forward so that I'm not just reacting, but I'm actually consciously responding to whatever challenge is thrown at me. All right. And so I'm just hoping that alerts you to maybe some new level of awareness around how you're responding. And we can just use the pandemic as a way of self evolution, right? And conscious awareness, and also that understanding of how others are, responding in their own ways due to their own traumatic, unhealed pasts, and we can look at all of that and we can have compassion for ourselves and everybody around us, which is ultimately, the necessary place to be in that awareness and compassion and acknowledgement to make the changes that we'll be more fulfilled by, right? So hope that this serves you. I hope that if it's been of value, please do share it anywhere with anyone that you feel could also gain some value from it. And I definitely want to check in with you guys, see who's been able to join me, and make sure that you're dropping any questions or comments or words of wisdom or experience that you feel could be valuable for everybody else, or just say hi and let me know where in the world you're tuning in from. Always love connecting with you guys, but I've got Bill in the house. Awesome to see you, and Lisa and Amy and Daryl from the Great White North. Always great to see you, and always great to see you, Bill, and Judy's here as well, and Daryl. It's like the Game of Thrones of different beliefs, of different perspectives. Yeah, absolutely. And that's the thing. We can get all black and white, and we can go all me against them, and like Jeff Brown mentioned, become sheeple, right? Oh, they're sheeple. How about it's just a way that, we as human beings are responding to traumatic experiences, to massive challenges. And it's just a way of understanding ourselves and each other on a higher level, right? It's like, okay, I understand that that's part of human nature, is to respond in these key ways. Based on some unhealed work, we're all just trying to survive. But if you want to be somebody who wants to thrive, you want to look and acknowledge this stuff, and you want to be a role model for other people to go, hey, I get where you're at. I've been there too, but here's how I'm choosing to move forward. And, you can come on this journey or you don't have to, whatever. But it's loosening the control, the need for false certainty that we want to have on everybody around us, and we want to classify and segregate and go, you're wrong and I'm right? Like, it's just, how about connect with our humanness? How about have some compassion for where other people are at? And the only way you get that is by doing the work on you. Otherwise, you stay stuck in your rightness, right? And making other people wrong. And all that does is perpetuate the cycle of trauma and fear, and we never get anywhere. So hope that helps. And love your perspective there, Daryl. And Peter's here as well, and Jim and Jared, always good to see you. And Lindsay is watching from the USA. Beautiful to see you, Lindsay. And Bill, be kind first. Absolutely. And it's difficult to, project that kindness towards others when you're not being kind to yourself, and you're kind of being very black and white with yourself and not honoring yourself, not acknowledging, what's truly going on for you and why you're doing what you're doing. So absolutely, Bill. And I love your kindness. So that's my message for you guys today. I hope that it gets you thinking. I hope it, maybe creates a little pathway of your own awareness, and also your relatability with other people as well. All right. So remember, there is a connection between your response to the pandemic and your relationship with trauma. And that's a really great, empowering thing to acknowledge within yourself. All right. There's so much power in that. So go and watch Jeff Brown's interview that I did yesterday on Limitless Potential. Enjoy it. I'd love to hear your feedback on it and any insights that you have. And thanks so much for joining me today. Oh, and I should mention, I'm doing something fun tomorrow. I don't know if you guys can catch me. It's at 3 p.m. Australian Eastern Standard Time tomorrow. One of my friends is putting me in the seat. We're going to do a bit of an interview, and we're going to dive into all things personal development, all things empowering yourself in your life. So if you want to join us for that chat, I will give you guys a link to where that's happening. So hope to see you guys there if you can join live. So that's it from me today. You know what I'm going to tell you. I'm going to tell you to go out there and live authentically, love deeply, and contribute meaningfully. All right, that's my message as always. Sending you guys so much love. Thanks for showing up live today. You're so appreciated. Hope this served you, and I cannot wait to see you guys tomorrow. Much love.